Welcome everyone to our very special after party with the creative talent behind this beautiful play, esta bellísima obra, Romeo y Julieta. And if you joined us late, I'm Rebeca Ibarra, the host of WNYC's Consider This. And this is my first experience with a fully bilingual Shakespeare. And I have to say, my heart needed this theater today, and it needed this kind of theater. So I hope you feel the same way. So let's bring on the extraordinary people who made this happen. We have Saheem Ali. He is the director of Romeo y Julieta, and he really conceived of this bilingual production as part of his continued audio exploration of William Shakespeare's work for the public theater. And to do this, he and his writing partner, Ricardo Pérez González, turned to a translation by one of the world's premier scholars of Shakespeare's work, a man who has written 46 papers, 6 books, and has 4 new major works of Shakespeare currently in production. And he joins us now. His name is Alfredo Michel Modenessi. The play we just heard was based on his fabulous Spanish translation of Romeo y Julieta, of Romeo and Juliet. And then, of course, we have the world's most famous lovers in history. We have Juan Castano, who is our Romeo in this production, and Lupita Nyong'o, who plays our Julieta. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. And if you are watching us right now and you have not already shared your questions in the YouTube comments, now is the time. We're going to be taking your questions in Spanish and English. So just type them in the comments and we'll see what you've got. And just right before the questions, I wanted to get to some really quick listener comments because I think I found these really uplifting and I hope you do as well. We have Gloria Bonelli. She wrote, listening to the play done in this bilingual fashion is like being at a gathering with my New Yorican family, part in Spanish, part English, all in Spanglish. It's very satisfying and very moving. Thank you. And we have Pedro Aguilar all the way from Argentina saying, suena excelente. Soy músico también desde Argentina y muy buena la propuesta bilingüe. Después de todo, la música es el lenguaje universal que nos hace sentir a todos hermanos. Gracias. So without further ado, I'm going to start with you, Saheem, since this was your inspiration. This is bilingual, so right from the start, it's not the Romeo and Juliet that we've seen so many times before. So what gave you the idea for this?
Well, para mí, español es la lengua del amor. It's like my first love was someone from the Latin American world, and so I learned Spanish so I could communicate with him. And traveling to South America, I just fell in love with the language and the culture. And I wanted to create something that felt like a subjective version of love for me. And also, it's one of my passions to just increase accessibility to Shakespeare. So whether that means putting people on stage who you don't normally associate with Shakespeare or putting in languages that you don't normally associate, I feel like there are so many ways in which we can increase the ways in which folks appreciate and fall in love with and follow and see themselves reflected in these beautiful plays. So Romeo y Julieta felt like it's the most widely read, well-known Shakespeare play in the canon. And so for a play that's about love and also that has such a broad sense of appeal and sense of familiarity, I really wanted to use this opportunity. And the public theater has been really pushing forward to reach Spanish-speaking audiences and find a way to bring Shakespeare especially to those folks. So in this moment of COVID and making a radio play and figuring out how to make theater in this moment, it felt like the perfect opportunity to do this.
And Lupita, I understand this is something you talked about with Saheem on and off for a long time. You actually, your experience with Romeo and Juliet with Saheem goes way back. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So Saheem and I are both from Kenya, and we met in a production of Romeo and Juliet back in 1997. When I was 14 years old, and Saheem played Mercutio and I played Juliet. So we've known each other since then. We lost touch for a number of years, and then we reconnected like, what, 12 years later, and we are very, very close friends. And yeah, he's had this idea about a bilingual Romeo and Juliet for a while, but it took both of us going and having our life experience, him with his Latin lover and me going to Mexico and 16 to learn Spanish before we could make this thing happen together in America.
And can you tell us, maybe a little bit about the challenges, Lupita, and the joys of embodying a character in both languages?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would have redone this play if it wasn't for the newness that Saheem offered in it. The adding the Spanish to it allowed for me to approach the text in a fresh way. Doing a play when you were 14, a lot of it was rote, and I didn't really understand there's nuances that I didn't get when I did it when I was 14. So to do it again and get out of muscle memory was only possible because there was this new added challenge of Spanish in it. I've never worked in Spanish. It's been harbored desire of mine to work in Spanish. And this felt like a really safe way to start, when you're not on screen as well. I really enjoyed the freshness of it, but it was, of course, extremely challenging. I speak Spanish. Yeah, sure. I speak Spanish to get by, but to do Shakespeare in Spanish is a whole other thing. And I was not really, I don't think I really understood what I was taking on when I began. And Saheem can attest to the fact that I had a major panic attack. But, working with this group and Juan, it was just there was the support, and it was refreshing. I could hear the play afresh in a way that you just take it for granted if you've heard it 1,000 times in English.
And Juan, this play really goes between, Spanish and English, sometimes mid-sentence. Had you ever had an experience like this before? Had you had the chance to act in a bilingual play quite like this?
No.
And what was it like?
Well, something I guess that I do sometimes is, most of the acting that I've done is in English. But if I'm ever struggling with a moment, I'll try to do it in Spanish, or I'll say the words in Spanish or something like that to see, I don't know, it just connects with me on a primal level. And that sort of helps me find the truth in whatever is happening. So I felt like going in and out of Spanish, if anything, grounded me. I would have had a much, much harder time if it was all in English. I can promise you that. So it worked in my favor.
So, Alfredo, you've spent your career interpreting Shakespeare's language and translating it into Spanish, but also contemplating why Shakespeare is relevant to Spanish-speaking readers and audiences. So why is his work so relevant in other languages?
You want the long answer or the short? Because that's
Middle.
That's a very complex question. I think the reasons are obvious. It just speaks to so many situations in so many different environments, or rather that belong in so many different environments. And a lot of people don't realize until they actually experience the thing that there's so much more to it than what they have got from, the usual, sometimes suspect sources. Reductions such as, well, this is a story where the two poor kids cannot really fulfill their love because their parents are so opposed to it. Sometimes they don't even know that the parents don't know. And that there's so much to it that is not covered by the usual just encyclopedic note. And so once they start looking into it, or rather than looking at it, experiencing it, then you realize it speaks far beyond their expectations. I can tell you, here in Mexico, we had this translation actually was made for a production, which premiered it will be 4 years in a couple of months now, and it turned into 2 separate productions. Actually, it was successful. It was very well received, but mostly because it didn't only speak about love. Actually, the director in his program notes said, this is not so much about love as it is about hate and divisiveness and so many other subjects and so many other issues that are present and that are urgent, and so on and so forth. And my own note for the first program called attention to the fact that, like in my country, I think it's our country, right, Rebeca? You are Mexican too?
Yes, I am.
Desafortunadamente.
And shout out to Lupita también. Just
our happily accidental Mexican Lupita, no doubt. En nuestro país, desafortunadamente, lo que vemos al final de esta obra se repite muy fácil. Es decir, hay mucha gente de edad mayor como yo que está de pie y hay muchísimos jóvenes que están muertos, que están yaciendo o que yacen muertos. Y esto es un aspecto de la obra que a todos nos llamó, nos sacudió y que quisimos también transmitir a nuestros espectadores acá en la Ciudad de México cuando la vieron, y cuando tuvimos la oportunidad de ir a algunos otros lados también tuvo esa resonancia. So we're talking about that. I mean, how it resonates with so many of the aspects of the kind of life that we have in our time.
Yeah, and for anyone who didn't get that, what Alfredo is saying is that in Mexico, it resonated in a very specific way because there are so many people in Mexico who are older, who are still alive, and then so many younger people in Mexico who have lost their lives. That is so interesting and so touching. I want to go back to you, Saheem, because we're getting listener questions. And one of the things people are wondering is, how did you decide what would be in English and what would be in Spanish?
Yeah, so it was a very subjective first attempt at that. I worked with Ricardo Perez Gonzalez, who is an extraordinary playwright who I worked with on a production of Twelfth Night that I did that was bilingual. And we started off with the English text on one side and Alfredo's Spanish text on the other. And we really went subjectively through and said, like, well, I put forth that I wanted the intimacy. I wanted like the most passionate speeches, the most famous speeches to be in Spanish, because I really, really wanted to center it in that experience and that language. And so we went through and we made our own selections of what we felt would be appropriate. And then the next step was working with the actors. So when Lupita looked through the script, when Juan looked through the script and read through it, like, they had their input too. And, Lupita went through all the text before rehearsal and said, okay, I like what you guys have put forth, but like, can we do this in Spanish? Can we do this in English? In a really like beautiful, because and Juan did too, because I really wanted them to bring their version of Spanish to the table, because there's so many different ways of being bilingual, right? You can be born with that language, it's your mother tongue. You can assume that language later in life. You can have a more of a proficiency in one or the other. And I really wanted each actor to bring their version of Spanish that was true to them in terms of their history, their family, their identity, and that to come forth. So I wanted Lupita to have a sense of what felt comfortable to her and what felt like, made sense to her when she spoke it. And the same with Juan. Like Juan said, he, with English text, translates to Spanish. So like with this, he was kind of doing the reverse in some of the parts. And so my goal at the end was really to have you hear something that the actors had a real sense of agency to craft what was bilingual to them, and for you to have a surprising, subjective, individual sense of, I never wanted you to feel like, oh, I can predict when it's going to switch, because every actor really brought their own sense of when a language switch made sense to them.
I want to go to the aspect about the fact that this is a radio play, and we are getting so many questions from the audience about how this play got made. And I want to zero in on one thing specifically. Lupita and Juan, there are so many beautiful, deeply intimate moments that it's impossible to tell from listening that you guys were actually miles apart, right? So I'll start with you, Lupita. How did that process go?
Oh Lord, this was a technical feat. I will say that. I mean, we all got equipment from the public sent to us, and it was our responsibility to set it up. And of course, we got technical support from them. And then it was up to us to press record, because if you didn't press record, then you were asked out. So, and then we were on Zoom so that we could see each other and work off of each other. We had a reading of the entire thing, so we got a sense of like the whole thing, and then we would meet in like the scenes that we were working on. And yeah, the intimacy was a challenge. We were figuring it out as we went along. Like I remember the first moment that I realized when we were working with Juan, a big question for me was the spatial relationship. Like when are we up close to each other, and when do we have distance between us, and how does that change our vocal quality? And we had very explicit discussions about the kisses, because we're both supposed to be experiencing this intimate moment, but what is it like? So we had to articulate, how long is this kiss? Who started it? Is it with the mouth closed, or are our mouths open? How long the whole thing, which was really awkward, but also really fun, because we developed all these games of, how to kiss ourselves, basically. So yeah, that was interesting.
I love it. So much hand kissing, just like when you're a teenager. Juan, tell us a little bit about your experience trying to navigate this world of audio and create a world and a steam for us.
Well, we had a lot of help from the designers. Just people were giving their input as we were doing it, and it was very helpful. Things that I wouldn't even think about, like what if you get closer, what if you look away, like things like that, to just learn to manipulate the sound a little better. But I think one of the things that I learned the most about was the idea that actually getting really specific about the environment ultimately makes what you're doing more and more specific. And I guess, when you're doing a play, right, when you're rehearsing, you don't think about, well, how loud am I speaking if this person's standing right there? I mean, all that is informed by where you are in the space already. You don't even think about it. If you get closer to someone, you lower your voice or you start whispering. If it's an intimate scene, like all of that specificity is filled in for you. And here it was about, getting everyone on the same page. But I think we were able to do that. Yeah.
You did. It was, yeah. I mean, people in the comments, people were saying like, I can't believe, some people were saying, I think they actually recorded this apart, and other people were saying like, no, they're together. They are together. I want to go to a listener comment question that is kind of for you, Alfredo. And I admit, I've said this before, I will say it again. I understood the parts in Spanish a little bit better than the parts in English. And they want to know from a person who has good Spanish, but not good enough to tell if it was period, if you kept the Spanish more modern than the original English.
Well, that's always a difficult question to answer, because I go by principle. Let's see if that answers the question. My principle is Shakespeare's language was Shakespeare's language, the language that he used in his own day. It would make no sense whatsoever for me to use a language that is not a present language. I hope that basically answers it. Because there are people who pretend, and I use the word purposefully when I say pretend, to employ archaic Spanish when translating Shakespeare. And the only thing that happens with that is that you're neither here nor there. That's an end that you will simply not be able to reach no matter what you do. you are not a contemporary of Shakespeare in any form, way, or shape. Plus, there's this other thing, and it makes me very proud to say I'm honored to have worked with the public theater, not only because I've been a fan of the New York Public Theater forever, but also because I've been, promoting this idea everywhere in the Shakespeare world that Latin American Shakespeare must be Latin American, also in terms of language. Then again, the language that we've been using to translate Shakespeare dates back only to the early 19th century. So there's no reason why we should, try and do something different, in the sense that this is the language that we can use, and this is the language that communicates what Shakespeare can communicate to us through our own ways, our own means. And I'm very happy that this, I knew, would work in Mexico. But now that I hear it in the voices of people with Colombian origins, such as I think Juan has, and Puerto Ricans, and people from Guatemala. I am half Salvadoran myself. And so there are certain things in my own language that do not entirely belong in the Mexican rhythms and so on. But it's mostly the case where translation is not a sort of inert copy of anything. It is a contributor to the life of the work as it is handed over to the rest of the world. So that's why my Spanish resonates with you here and now. Then again, it's not colloquial where it doesn't need to be colloquial. And in some parts, actually, Saheem left out some really nasty parts or saucy parts that I was very glad to create for characters like Mercutio and company, who happen to be foul-mouthed as, not even the worst in our day. So you should take care of that too.
We have a question from Lindsay watching online for Lupita, and she wants to know, how do you embody the love of a 13-year-old that she feels and grounded with such clear authenticity?
Oh, that's such a lovely compliment. Thank you. How? Well, I think for me, because I played her when I was 14, they say that you're too young to play Juliet until you're too old to play Juliet. And reading this play from my point of view now at 38, I became aware of all the things I wasn't aware of when I was 14. I went to it with a complete openness and no pressure, no preconceived notions, and no experience even falling in love, at that point. And then now I've fallen in love so many times and had my heart broken and everything. Looking back at that, I'm just like, I'm so much more aware of how irresponsible Juliet is. And so for me, it was about, okay, how do you allow yourself to be so vulnerable and available to love without fear, And I've been a teenager and in love, so I remember how consuming it was, and allowing yourself to just go back to that, I think it's actually, for me, I think it's easier to resort to a younger time than it is to reach for an age that I have not yet experienced. And so it was a lovely exercise in allowing for that youthful side of me to kind of bubble up to the surface. And and just checking my own pragmatism. It just didn't serve to be in judgment of these very poor decisions these kids seem to be making.
Juan, I wonder if playing Shakespeare, interpreting Shakespeare purely for audio changed the way you listen to Shakespeare and to his words.
I don't know. That's the honest answer.
Yeah.
I think I think I still need some time to process the play. You know, it was really cool to read along both in English and Spanish, and you know, in some ways, understanding the moments even better. You know, as you're hearing it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, to be honest.
We have this for, let's say Saheem. So here is a question in Spanish, and it's a comment and question. And they're saying, es bien importante que este tipo de trabajo continúen haciéndolo. Incluir dos idiomas lo hace universal e inclusivo. ¿Seguirán haciendo este tipo de trabajo? And I'll do a little translation. It's very important that you continue doing this type of work. Having two language makes it universal and inclusive. Will you continue doing these kinds of work?
Sí, es muy importante. Conoce con el público, quiere hablar este trabajo en el futuro. So, entonces, en esta obra es 50% en español y 50% en inglés. Y espero que en el futuro es más por ciento, 100% en español. So I hope in the future it'll be like all in Spanish. We're going to work towards that. We really are, because it's important. It really is. Sorry for my very poor Spanish, but I'm trying.
No, it's perfecto. And I think we could talk all night, but we're going to have to wrap it with one more questions, because we have many questions from viewers and listeners that say they want to know if this play will ever be on stage. So Saheem, Lupita, Juan, any chance?
Well, Lupita and Juan, yeah.
Huh? That question's not for me at all.
Saheem, tell us.
Well, you know, I saw Lupita do this when she was 14 years old. I've seen her like evolve into like the extraordinary actor that she is. I saw Juan do Oedipus El Rey and Transfers. Like, I've seen them both, like, you know, embody these like incredible characters. And nothing would make me happier than to one day, you know, see them in a huge outdoor theater like the Delacorte in New York, you know, performing in Spanish and in English for an audience of thousands. Yes. But this kind of work is really important to the public theater. And you know, I'm really proud of this. And like tonight, like, look at what we did tonight. Like, we have this audience enjoying this play. Lupita is in Kenya. It's 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. She woke up just for this, you know. Juan is in LA. Alfredo is in Mexico. Like, we have people from, it's like, it's, you know, COVID has been really, really tough for a lot of us, but look at this moment. Like, we never would have made this if it wasn't for right now, you know. We never would have been gathering in this kind of a space. So I think it bodes well that our energies and our talents and our hearts have gone into this endeavor, and that extraordinary cast that you heard tonight, like, they're amazing. So I hope that this kind of energy and this kind of passion will just create more opportunities for work like this to come.
Well, as a Mexican and a bilingual baby, I can say this work was so important to me, and I thank you so much for your time and just for this great work. Our guests tonight, Saheem Ali. We have Juan Castano in LA, as we said, Alfredo Michel Modenessi in Mexico. Saheem, you are in New York, right? And of course, Lupita Nyong'o, who was gracious enough to join us all the way from Nairobi, Kenya, waking up at 4 a.m. for this. So thank you so much. A special thank you also to WNYC's Race and Justice Unit for its role in producing this event. And please tell your friends about Romeo y Julieta. And if you missed anything or you love this and you want to share it, you can listen to Romeo y Julieta wherever you get your podcasts. Like us, tweet us, help more people enjoy this beautiful play. And last but not least, we want to thank again tonight's sponsor, Bank of America. Bank of America's partnership with the Public Theater continues to uplift voices that promote inclusivity and diversity. And we want to thank them for sponsoring Romeo y Julieta and for bringing the classics to life for a wider audience of Spanish speakers and younger generations. I am Rebeca Ibarra. Thank you so much and good night.